Reflecting on our last mutual time together of ANBERLIN, that being from the track Decoder, the second track in the preceding work on the Convinced EP, of which we're now to the third song, Banshee, I think back to the comment I left you with, and what we briefly explored on behalf of the lyrics, and as I said, I'm not operating from a declared perspective via the band in terms of this is what our overall song or album vision is. My theory is that this is sort of a exploration of relationships as they go wrong. The first song, Lacerate, so good, I love that debut still, was all about toxic relationships. And that can be taken broadly, but of course, there's a general romantic root of where ANBERLIN has played around substantially albums past as well. But Decoder also has a bit of a broad lens, but it definitely has, I would say, a specific romantic influence. At least when you experience the story of somebody dealing with a dead or dying relationship, an obstructed one certainly, I noted via maybe communication being malfunctioning between both parties. I'm starting to see this story play out, though, via Banshee. As I just survey the lyrics for myself, I'm seeing a story taking place where we have the basis that Lacerate set with a toxic relationship, and then we see some of maybe that in action and what it's resulted in. Now we get perhaps the result. Again, I don't know if this is necessarily what the band is intending. This is just what I'm extracting. And, music has that broad approach, of course, and I don't necessarily like to impose my own thoughts unless otherwise stated. Certainly not to misrepresent the band's vision. I just don't know at the moment. Feel free to clarify down below if you happen to be more in the know about maybe the interpretation via the band on behalf of both Lacerate and Decoder, and perhaps Banshee as well as the remaining works. I'm going off very much a fresh lens and experience with all of you as we entertain Convinced together, which has been a pleasure, not just in highlighting new, just great music generally, but ANBERLIN. Many of you know I've loved this group for many years. They were an early foundation for what brought me into the metal scene of where I now sit as a devout metalhead, and metal/rock fan. And it didn't take that long. My earliest foundations on music and what fostered such a love for me in my life with that particular art form, though I admire the others as well, just music is such a connection in my life, as I've said many times, and I've been wanting for a while to bring it onto this channel in terms of a greater exploration. I'm doing just that, with, bands like ANBERLIN considered. But I think back to what my earliest foundations were, and they were with Christian music. Didn't take that long for Christian rock to make its way in, and for ANBERLIN alongside other groups as well, but ANBERLIN was one of the more primary presences. Didn't take that long for them to be introduced to me via Ready Fuels, and ever since, I've been a big fan of theirs. And I've really admired this surprise return that we had after the hiatus, especially with the Silverline debut, and if you inquired on, I did cover that album in full, many of you know that, and as such, there were comments asking if I would do the same for Convinced, of course. I told you we'd be returning to this group eventually, the door's always open, and though I didn't think it'd be this quickly, here we are. And we're experiencing a new chapter of their vision together. As I love doing with music, it just is such a fun corporate quality that we can enjoy in terms of mutual good art. That some of the other artistic languages offer, yes, but music I've just found it to be so potent, and I can't get enough of, again, sharing in good art experiences with all of you. And perhaps fostering paths for those of you who are not yet ANBERLIN listeners. I don't think it'll take that much time to convince you of how good, no pun intended, of how good this group is. Many of you ANBERLIN fans like myself could speak to that as well. I'm sure for anybody in the comments who, if you wish to disclose so, if you're approaching on a first-name basis with them. And my hope is that there is a bit of a diversity in, how we approach this song. That there's a general pool of different audience members, right? That some of you maybe are well-established and in the know ANBERLIN fans like myself. Maybe there's some fresh listens, that we're experiencing good music together and quality work. ANBERLIN offers that. To set a baseline for you, just in quick summation, big in the Christian rock scene. They've been for a number of years, so they certainly have plenty of mainstream appeal. I think you're going to really like this if you're into just general rock music and you admire a mixture of tone and fresh vision, which these last two EPs are certainly offering that, though this is, so far, at least in the first two tracks, the most mainstream on rock influence to ANBERLIN's work. That is a specific connection I'm seeing. And of course, I gravitate more to the aggressive in style, though I am open to more ballad numbers. And we'll see how this evolves. I mean, we have 3 tracks to go, and Silverline had a bit of play around mixture as well. So I'm waiting to see if this kind of diversifies its focus. Let's humor Banshee together, though. As I said, I'm seeing this sort of as, again, the evolution of the story that's being told of a relationship gone wrong. one that definitely has a broad application, as you'll see when we experience the work together. And of course, if you're not familiar with my format, I will highlight the lyrics for you in the video so you can have that accommodation if you want to read along with the story for yourself. I do provide that. So you'll see Banshee explores vision. You'll see that broad possibility. Though again, there's that specific thread I'm noticing. I don't know, again, just to be clear, if that's the intended vision of the group. It's just something that I'm extracting, but I find it to be a fascinating layer. And coupled with sufficient music that has a real retro presence and some new elements. I mean, again, Silverline in full brought a lot of that in. Though again, that mainstream ANBERLIN quality is not lost. Whether it be on good lyric writing or just fun, mainstream sounding quality rock music. ANBERLIN has always entertained me. I hope for those of you that are approaching on a fresh basis with them, they do the same for you. And it triggers you to perhaps go back and explore their back catalog, which you should. But for those of you who are knowledgeable ANBERLIN fans, right, you can speak to that, of course. We're going to take this journey together, all of us, right, in experiencing Banshee for the first time, continuing on our journey through Convinced, which has been a good EP, 2 tracks in. Let's add a third. Hang on a second. All right, here we go. Okay, I like that open snare. It's a bit dated, again, and pleasurably. This one's definitely softer. So far. It could change.
You could take a walk down a darker lane, beat yourself up every step of the way, and live your life like a sacrifice. Won't bring you back to yesterday. I can hear the pain shaking in your
The softness of the song, I do think, is a fitting complement to the lyrics. I love how original this is. The isolation and the drops, I really like that. That's smooth. I'm really liking this one. I think, again, it's got a nice pop mood. But this softness is truly appropriate. I love how the sound of the music embodying the emotions of the lyrics. It's doing a lot of storytelling, even beyond just the narrative. The two are working beautifully together. This song definitely feels a little more stretched than the last one. That one was only about 2.5 minutes. I forget how long this is. Nearly 4 minutes. We're gonna spend more time with it, but I like how slow the mood is on this one. And I love the electronic influences too. Admirable subtlety. A very timely piece too, just judging where people are, I think, these days. So this is an readily applicable inspiration. I like that beat. That's good. Again, quality work. I love a transition out. That one is incredibly sufficient. You think about the lyrics, and you consider, as I said, this has broad application for sure, right? I might limit it a bit in terms of just qualifying the one theme, the possibility of a theme, on the storytelling regard of a relationship gone wrong, and this being from the toxic relationship foundation with Lacerate to Decoder's obstructed relationship state to maybe where it's sitting now, versus Banshee coming along, and this being and I haven't looked in the last track to see if that evolution has continued, but I will, of course, when I get to those songs and covering them here. But I see this sort of again as like a third piece that follows, that it is the conclusion of somebody in that they're truly desiring to have that relationship bond in their life, but they're not getting it, and just a relationship is in such an awry place. They're in this negative, tragic season of life that perhaps the possibility of thought becomes, why not just abandon it altogether, right? It's tragic, though again, you could take this theme, it's a common one, right? Especially these days. I think it's a message people need to hear. I mean, you look at wherever you happen to be, there is so much dissatisfaction with life, generally. It might not just be relationships. Again, I could see the direct route here of how you could take this song and stretch it around to fit different extremes. I like, again, how multifaceted and diversified it can be. I like songs that have that broad edge, especially ones that offer such a beautiful catharsis to them. A sad exploration, but one that is so resonant. And the music is just it's a beautiful balance here between narrative and song. If this were rougher, I don't think it would be, I don't want to say it'd be bad necessarily, because I mean, I'm operating on a hypothetical, at least on that assumption, but to ground it as a softer piece, when you're dealing with a song that requires delicacy and a bit of a tiptoe approach, I think it's a more fitting association. And you see how the song takes the emotion. I love how this is structured. Like with the background lingers, like you can just cry, and you hear that at least in the supporting vocal presence. It's such a beautiful amplification that automatically communicates the pathos of the piece to the listener. It's just so exquisite on that bond. And the way it's written, right? It doesn't feel, there's many songs I've dealt with, and there's some great ones. I could suggest I've dealt with types of themes of just reconciling the negativity of life from a broad lens or self-destructive behavior. I specifically identify suicide because I read that line, you could take your life, and that's what it automatically, brings up. But there's plenty that I could suggest that, again, have potency, they're connective, and they help, right? I love that about music, that it can be a helpful influence, especially in times of trouble. It can be a beautifully practical healing aid. That's why I admire music so much, at least in many respects, and I think back to the many troubled seasons that I've been in life, and rock music has been my preferred listen, of course, but I admire the authenticity, as I said many times, specifically of rock and metal music. There's just an assertion I don't find sometimes I do, but I don't find it as readily expressed in other artistic forms within the music landscape, or different genres for the most part. Rock and metal music routinely offer it, if that is intended. And I admire the originality and how this is expressed. It does not feel in any way, as I peruse the piece, I love how this is written. Like two blood brothers at the end. That wording, ANBERLIN is so sophisticated and particularly individualistic, at least in the way that I approach their lyrics. They feel in contrast to other groups, and I like that. I like how this song doesn't necessarily feed into a feeling of being cliche. It feels original. I can hear the pain shaking in your voice, screaming like a banshee into the void. I've never heard banshee used in that context. It's a fitting title, and I think it's a great image to go with. I do. But it's not just, this isn't a song, it takes its main heart and resides entirely in the poetic. It does take that time to explore, I guess, in a way that, again, is so direct, right? Especially on I think it's the chorus sections. You could take the chance, you could take your life, imagine all the pain that you'd leave behind, or you could stop right there. Here, you could turn around, not all is lost, and the lost one to be found. There's that biblical connection, possibility of that. I love that. I guess it's part of the verse, actually, because I think I can hear the pain shaking your voice. That's the chorus section, because it is repeated. I love how that's written. I like how it swings around in terms of different vision styles, right? Indirect, direct, and it feels like a good parallel to other songs that explored similar themings. Whatever angle you approach in terms of lyrical navigation, how you picture it in context, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, from if you do wish to disclose your respective, of course, and whatever angle you approach you take. Fresh ANBERLIN listener, longtime fan, I'd love to hear about it down below. What are your thoughts on Banshee? And for you, are you seeing, like me, a connection to the rest of the album, that maybe is this overall story taking place, or do you see it more as an isolated work? Or if you happen to know the band's vision and the intended ambition of illustration with this piece, I'd love to hear about it down below, because again, I'm operating, as I've said, entirely on just a lyrical overview and listening to the song, trying to best associate my thoughts to the overall ANBERLIN experience with Convinced and understanding its heart without having that mindset declared for me, because I just couldn't find anything, at least present. But even just on a fresh look, or certainly on a fresh experience, this song, beautifully connective. I love the mood of it. Its soft approach is completely appropriate, really builds that emotional resonance with the piece, and the lyrical storytelling, direct and indirect, but navigates this type of exploration of somebody in a negative state of life, or maybe in the state of a relationship crisis, right? And just looking at their lives in context to their dreams and ambitions seemingly unachievable. It navigates hyper-realistic emotions. I find Banshee, like many pieces on ANBERLIN's library, much so like the past experiences we've taken on both Silverline and Convinced thus far, I find it to be quite a memorable work. I like its placement in the album. It definitely shifts the mood a bit from Decoder and Lacerate, being a little more intense, but again, the mood here is so appropriate. I love that softer approach. Really good work there. I can't wait to explore more with you. As I've said, we're taking down as we did with Silverline, we're going through the entirety of Convinced together. Next will be Animals. But Banshee is quite good. I like that work. It might be quite singular from the other pieces, but the individualism of it matched with its ambition, possibility of ambition, I respect. And I think ANBERLIN achieved perhaps what they were hoping for astoundingly well. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.